Erda, the mother of the primarchs and the second greatest perpetual to ever live. A pivotal character in not only the Horus Heresy, but the entirety of the Warhammer 40k universe. And the most hated character in all of 40k. What about Erebus, I hear some of you saying, but the fact of the matter is, there is corn of Erebus. There is in fact no corn or any type of nonsense regarding Erda. Yes, the 40k community hates this character so much that they would rather whack it off to the dude who skinned a child, rather than literally Femme Emperor. Yeah, people do not like this chick. But then that begs the question, why? And it all stems from the way she was introduced, seemingly out of nowhere with massive implications. Because surprise surprise, randomly inventing a character to change massive plot devices means people do in fact not like her, and will not be receptive of such a massive change at such a random time. But despite the way she was introduced, Erda is actually a really great character. I know, shocking. And it was because of this asinine introduction that many people tend to ignore her. They only see her on a surface level, they read how she introduced, and they don't bother more with the character. But what if I told you Erda wasn't a bad character, but is in fact one of the greatest characters in all of 40k? Bold statement, I know. But ladies and gentlemen, join me today in today's Warhammer 40k lore video as we take a look at Erda, and find out just why she is in fact one of the greatest characters in all the setting. But before we can get to the rest of it, we need to start off with the thing that everyone can agree on was just absolutely the worst thing for this character. That being her introduction. Erda was introduced midway through the book Saturnine, which was set during the Siege of Terra, and lo and behold, Mr. John Grammaticus, everyone's other favorite character, then decides to meet with the so-called mother of the primarchs. And the exposition we get from there is incredibly important, but also kind of shoehorned in here, not gonna lie. And this is where a lot of the hatred for Erda comes from. The fact that she was so important but just shoehorned in here and did a bunch of exposition, and it really rubbed people the wrong way. And you know it's valid, really, because yeah, this is complete and utter bullshit. But my issue with this is the way that people treat it. Yes, it's a stupid decision, but y'all act like Games Workshop don't do this. This is not something that was exclusive to Erda. Games Workshop and his writers have a terribly fantastic, utterly infuriating habit of simply shoehorning things into the universe that quote-unquote have always been like that. The most egregious example we have are the Primaris Marines. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, having anything new is apparently a big no-no, at least according to GW. So many times when we have to deal with new lore, we have to deal with the old shenaniganery of, oh, this has always existed forever and always. The problem is, this rubs people the wrong way so that they just don't care about it at all for a good couple of years until they look back on it, and after admittedly Games Workshop has done a couple retcons or so, and it ends up becoming pretty good lore. That seems to be the way with GW and how they work. Why that's the case? Well, you gotta ask somebody with a higher paycheck than me, laddie. But hey, it is what it is. Yet with Erda, this sat a lot more hectic because of the way that she was introduced and what she was. Erda is a perpetual. Not only a perpetual, but probably the second most powerful perpetual, second only to Mr. Big E himself. She was also the second most important person on the Primarch project, and one of the very few perpetuals to stay with Big E. She was a geneticist, and incredibly important to the genetic Primarch project. Indeed, together with her and Amara Astarte, they were able to help the Emperor give birth to the Primarchs. Now, those weren't the only two involved, but they were the two most important, aside from Big E, of course. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a big crux of why people don't like the character. All of this information was essentially brand new, and trying to explain what exactly happened. And as we know, 40k fans, we're not exactly too happy when someone goes and changing our canon, even if it may be for the best. And despite what many people would say, I believe that the changes to this story are indeed better. They were implemented terribly, mind you, but it actually does give a lot of context. And this is why Erda is such a good character. Context, context, context. And yes, some of you may argue, oh, she was introduced purely to be a literary device to explain things that the Emperor couldn't, and that's a fair and valid argument, and you definitely got a few pointers going there. But I'll still say it again. Why is that such a bad thing? She adds so much context to the Emperors, Primarchs, and Perpetuals that it actually makes sense. Many times we were left scratching our head, trying to figure out what the hell did the Emperor do. And if you just read all the Emperor's stuff by himself, you're still going to be a little confused. But if you read the Emperor's story in conjunction with the understanding of what a Perpetual is, and what perpetuals do and their story, Biggie's decisions start making way more sense. Again, you may not agree with them, but hell, at least you can understand where Big Man was going with the idea. And Erda is the key to that. Not only does she give you an insight into what Biggie does, she gives you into an insight about what other perpetuals are like. How they think, how they work, and how they operate. But then that brings me into my next point onto why people really don't like Erda. The whole perpetual storyline. There is a good chunk of people who think that perpetuals are a stupid idea, and thus anything dealing with them and how they were introduced is just dumb. Again, whilst I'll admit where they were introduced, not the best, and certainly arguably one of the worst ways, I like the perpetuals. I like the idea behind them. And it makes a lot more sense to me than, lo and behold, one day big magic man existed and now he wants to make everything golden. But to a lot of folks, they don't like the idea of perpetuals being the next evolution of genetics. Essentially, it's humanity's final form, will obviously become perpetuate in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of people, they don't like that idea. But that's the thing. People just don't like that idea. They don't like the way about it, they don't like how it works, and they certainly don't like that they're only hearing about it from some random woman way in the Siege of Terror. Again, understandable, but again, I like the idea of the perpetuals, because again, it gives context to the Emperor. But ladies and gentlemen, those alone are not the reason why people hate Erda. There is, in fact, one major reason why people absolutely despise this woman. And that is because, to many people, she is the direct cause of the Horus Heresy and the setting of Warhammer 40k, and that's because what she did with the primarchs. Taken from Saturnine. Is that what perpetuals do then? John asked. Is that what they are? Erda sat up and looked at him. Her eyes were as blue as crystals. John, I tell you truly, I have lived a long life, and I have no idea what perpetuals are. I am one, and I don't know. There are theories, and some seem convincing. The one I favor is what we are, the next version of the species. I believe the perpetuals, which have been appearing for at least the last 45,000 years, are abnormally advantageous mutations. The theory suggests we are what you might call Homo superior, the next step along for the triumphantly successful Homo sapiens, where the next evolutionary form of our species is intended to take. Intended? He echoed and frowned. She raised a hand apologetically. That was the wrong word. I do not subscribe to the idea of a divine plan or the work of God. I meant the process of nature, advancing a species, enhancing it. I believe that the perpetuals are the early appearances of the next generation of humans, freak outliers, appearing in very small numbers, in advance of the evolutionary curve. And I believe, not because nature has any sort of plan, but because we are a fully sentient species, our purpose is to shape and guide the human race, marshal its course and trim its sails, use our gifts and longevity to drive towards the future, to the point which we are the new normal, the point which Homo sapiens collectively become Homo superior. And the Emperor? Erda grimaced. You know, I loathe that term. It speaks to every part of his arrogance. Does he have a name otherwise? Many. He has had many names over the millennia, none of them his own. I have no idea if he has ever had a true name. I know him as Neoth. Neoth? His name is Neoth? John shook his head in wonder. That's crap, and a huge disappointment. No, that's just how I knew him. It was what he called himself when I met him. We were roughly cordial. When was that? In the time of the first cities. He was a warlord even then. A king. And he was doing exactly what most of my kind do. He had taken on the stewardship of the human race. He had a greater understanding of the universe than anyone. Such was his power. He saw the dangers of the warp, the fragility of humanity, the reoccurring flaws of our species, credulity, anger, false faith, yearning, everything that was terrible and also wonderful about humanity. When I met him, he had already begun on his path to shepherd mankind towards a brighter future. She looked at John. I believed in him, John. I adored him. Most of us did. It was not hard to love him, hard not to be in awe of him, harder still to perceive the dangers of his ambition. He wanted to achieve what most of us dreamed of, and he had the will and power to do it. Not just do it, but do it faster and more completely than any perpetual could. He had the means to accelerate our efforts and accomplish in just a few generations what might otherwise take millions of years. John drew up a stool and sat down facing her. Go on, he urged. Over time, he located and tried to recruit every single perpetual on Earth, Erda said softly. Some of us joined him, others decided not to. Some of us fought him. Several of the greatest conflicts in world history were caused by rival perpetuals trying to thwart his program. Did you know that? I suspected so, said John. He prevailed, John, though there were errors when he was badly set back. Over time, disaffection grew among our kind. Even the best of us could barely keep up, and I think he resented that. He was quite ruthless, and he is astoundingly arrogant. I suppose it would be hard not to, if you were him. He was always right. He never looked for advice or counsel. He reshaped the world and drove it forward, and he would not be questioned on the merit of his plan. To do so was heresy. John raised his eyebrows. Hilarious, but you stayed at his side for far longer than I should have, she replied. Most of us divorced ourselves from his efforts. He was taking risks. One by one, perpetuals allied to him slipped away. He was glad to see the back of them. I think he was tired of their objections and weary of their caution. He wanted results. He became angry with minds that could not match his speed of thought and his genius. So most of us left him. They went away, into other lives, or went into hiding, or left the homeworld. A few stayed. The Sigillite, of course. He was always married to the cause. And, as I say, I stayed longer than I should have. Erda, what risk was he taking? John asked. The acceleration, John. He had no patience. He believed he knew everything he needed to know. He constantly pushed ahead. That's the irony. We are immortals. But he couldn't bear to waste time. Natural evolution takes millions of years. He refused to wait that long. He'd worked for 20,000-30,000 years and felt that was more than enough time. The natural stewardship of the perpetuals, born through the evolutionary cycle, was not rapid enough for his needs. So, once most of the natural perpetuals had left his side, he built his own. The primarchs, John whispered. The primarchs, she said with a small nod. They are not actual perpetuitae in any biological sense. They are the artificial equivalents of the perpetuals. Functionally immortal beings born of his blood and power and vigor, coded to accelerate his program even faster. They were designed to live long enough to see his plan through to the end and not die away so quickly, the way humans did. And they were indoctrinated from birth to follow his word and not have opinions of their own, like naturally occurring perpetuals. They were made to service his dream. He took what nature had wrought in the perpetuals, and he built his own pathologicized version, and through them, their genetic lineages, their legions. He didn't do that alone. Erda was silent for a moment. Outside, the desert air sighed, and the neck bows of livestock clunked. He did not, she said. I was with him then, one of the last few. Me, my colleague Astarte, a few others. I had misgivings. We all did. But he was very convincing, compelling, and by then, he had become more powerful than ever. He needed a geneticist to work with him, and that was my art. And he needed a biological source, a gene stock rare enough to mix with his own. A perpetual. You. Me. I was the other source, a genetic donor. He is the father of mankind. I am the surrogate mother, and the clinician, and the midwife. We made 20 fine sons, but he allowed me no influence. I was just a biological instrument, and once they were born, I began to properly understand the future he had prepared for them. The bitter destiny, the aggressively rapid and unnatural, savage evolutionary jumpstart he was driving towards. No good ever comes of coercing nature, John. Through his sons, he would force the human race into the future, force it into submission, and defy the warp to do it. He had built artificial perpetual analogs and weaponized them, ready to resist the unbending cosmos. He was planning a crusade to retake the stars, to claim back in a bloody century or two what had taken millennia to lose in the first place. That was when I stepped away too. Astarte stayed and finished the work on the Legion gene build. But I left. I was heartbroken and bereft. But I stepped away. No, not quite, said John. This part I know. Eldrad told me. You didn't just step away, Erda. You tried to stop him. I tried to save my sons. You scattered them. She sat forward and stared at the ground, her hands across her mouth. I did. I took them from him. I cast them onto the ties to spare them from his terrible ambition. Shit, John murmured. What did he do? Raged. For a long while. I was gone by then. I hid for a long time, but he never tried to find me. I always thought that odd. I always expected his vengeance, for he could be vindictive, but it never came. Eventually, I came here, a place I'd always loved. I was born not far from here. I withdrew from the world, and he never came looking for me. She glared at him and smiled sadly, because, I suppose, it was academic by then. He had moved on, fired and driven as always. He sent the Astartes on their crusade anyway, a program of reconquest, as he had always planned. But in truth, it was just an excuse to find his sons, and his scattered sons were found again, of course, and returned to his side. I had failed. My efforts merely delayed his program. I tried, John, but I did not stop him. Will you try again? No, John. It's too late. Please. Everything is broken, John. John slumped. All's not coming. I can't do this alone. Perhaps you shouldn't. Why not? My fundamental objection to Neof's great work, she said firmly, is his haste and urgency to supplant the natural flow of life with an artificial version that tramples ethics and morality and wise prudence. Artificial perpetuals, John. That was his plan. And look, see how it has worked. And you, John. Earlier you chided me and my kind for not taking action. You called us derelict. That we had not made the concentrated effort to block Neo's progress. And that we should feel ashamed that you, a fake and neophyte immortal, should be doing what we have long since done. You are an artificial perpetual too, in a way, John. Or at least, you were. I have no reason to trust your judgment. For you, like him, and like my poor accursed children, are trying to hasten the movement of fate. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we see why people really just hate this woman. She was the one who scattered the primarchs to the four corners of the bloody galaxy. And lo and behold, she was the reason why they landed on different planets, why they had different opinions, different thoughts, different views, and why the Emperor had to go around searching for them. From here, many people claim that she is the reason why the primarchs fell to chaos. That if they had been with the Emperor, then it would have never... That if they had been with the Emperor, he could have guided them, they would have never fallen to chaos, etc., so on and so forth. Thus, a whole chunk of the community squarely blames this little lady right here for all the bullshit of the heresy. And to that, I say, no, she's not. That line of thinking is inherently flawed because of one very important fact. The Emperor saw his sons not as sons. He saw them as tools, as weapons to be used. There is something that a lot of people seem to forget about the Emperor, and allow me to remind you. He did not consider his sons to be sons. He did not love them. The only argument you can make is that being of Horus Lupercal. The Emperor loved only one of his sons, like actually treated him as a kid, and that was his firstborn, Horus. Everyone else, a tool to be used. Meaning that even if the Emperor was there, the primarchs would become disillusioned or dispassionate, or they would have been found wanting in some way, shape or form. And lo and behold, when you have desire, chaos will come a-knockin'. Secondly, many people are acting like Erda did this all on her own, which very much is a possibility. But equally great a possibility is that this was just chaos working its shenaniganery. Who's to say that the Chaos Gods didn't have their finger in that pie too? Maybe they allowed Erda to see a conversation she shouldn't have. Maybe they were the ones who slowly slipped in that information about the Emperor taking her sons and turning them into warriors. Maybe? Don't know. Maybe that could have been it. But then that comes to another thing about Erda, which I will touch on later. Keep that at the back of your mind. But now I want to talk about this and how people consistently give Erda the short stick here. Many people think, oh, she's an absolute idiot. There's no reason. Why would you ever do that? You're so dumb. But to those people, they're forgetting the idea of hindsight. Hindsight is 20/20, so when looking back on a situation and judging people, you need to judge them in that situation at that time. And consider Erda's perspective real quick. Erda just helped the Emperor make sons. Erda considers them her children, unlike the Emperor. Now why do I say that? Because when she found out that the Emperor was going to turn them into tools of war, when he was going to take what she had helped make and literally turn it into bloodthirsty tyrants, she had to do something. If she took the primarchs with her, the Emperor would have found them eventually, and she would have lost them one by one. But if she threw them to the hands of fate, well, at least they would be away from the Emperor, and they could make their own choices without him influencing them. If your choice is either 100% guarantee that they're going to be turned into bloodthirsty tyrants underneath someone who doesn't even see them as humans, or a chance they can live peaceful, happy lives, which do you take? I know which one I'd take. I'd gamble. So would many other people. So would many parents. So would most mothers. When you consider that in context, Erda's decision starts making a lot more sense. Was it the best choice? Absolutely not. But now you can see and understand how she came to that decision. And saying that it's completely unmotivated and just bullshit by GW does not give the character enough credit. And at that point, it's starting to become arguing in bad faith. But before I get on into my own opinions about Erda, we need to cover her final act. That being her death. In the End in the Death Volume 2, she dies. Basically, good old nothing Mr. Erebus pops up, and it's like, hey, come join Chaos. Erda vehemently and quite hilariously tells him to fuck off. Also, fun little note, Erda then uses her powers to kill 4 greater demons. And these are her powers. These are not warp powers. It's specifically stated. The Emperor can channel the warp, but she, like other massive perpetuae, have their own access of magical reserves. It's not exactly sure what magic this is. Some people theorize it's like a type of earth magic or natural nature-based magic. But again, this is her power. This is not Chaos. And she was able to do that by herself. Also, in the aftermath of it, Erebus begins wondering and musing, did she let her kill him? Because even he's like, this seems a little bit too simple. So there is that hanging in the air. Though that could just be Erebus being Erebus, but, you know, food for thought. Something to chew on, as they say. And then this comes back to the point I mentioned earlier, and what really upsets me is the fact that GW decided to kill off this character. Now some people say they did this because of the reaction to her, and that might be a thing, but I don't think so. If you take a look at the way that the Heresy series was crafted, the way that the books work together, the way that the authors work together, and what they say about the matter, it doesn't really seem like, hey, this is something that did on accident, or oh no, we gotta press the red button to make the lady go away. It could be, but then again, from my investigations and my understanding, it doesn't really seem like that. But the fact that they killed her really upsets me, because she could have existed as a character to deal with the repercussions. The biggest thing about Erda is that people call her a hypocrite, people say she's full of shit, people say that they don't like her, but that's because we've never gotten to see her opinion on it. She never fully saw what she did, the aftermath of the heresy. She never fully saw everything that happened. She secluded herself away because she was done. She never saw what occurred because of the actions of the Emperor and herself. She never fully understood Neos' great work and what she had done by messing with it. If she had existed even a little bit beyond, if she died at the end of the Scouring, I think maybe that could be it. I don't know about her existing in 40k, but her dying into the Scouring, I think that may have been some excellent work with her character, because we can see her. We can see someone interacting with a world that she directly helped create. That type of context is invaluable. That perspective is mental. We could have her having her own internal conflict, seeing, yes, what she did, she believed in, what was right, but asking herself, hey, if this is the future, maybe I should have just let him turn my kids into monsters. Having that internal conflict would have been fabulous. But then GW just killed her off. Probably because they wanted everything in the Heresy to stay in the Heresy, the Scouring to be in the Scouring, and 40k to be in 40k, as they like to do in separating their IPs and timelines, but it's just, there is so much potential here. So much. Now people always complain about Erda that she's just a narrative plot point. Now yes, she could be a convenient method of conveyance, but that doesn't mean that she's not also a great character. A character can indeed be someone just purely to give off their own explanations, but if you look into the character, the way they lived and their own story, and if their story, if their past grievances and their ways of thinking impact the way that they tell the story, the way that they give the narrative, and you can conflict and contrast that with other characters, you suddenly have something amazing, something that makes the reader think about. And that's what Erda could have been, but she was not. She was killed off at the end of the Heresy to wrap up everything in a neat little bow, leaving many unanswered questions, and a character that left a very bad taste in people's mouth. But to wrap up about Miss Erda, Erda suffers from the sin of GW, that being introducing something poorly, quickly making a decision out of it, and just wrapping it up in a nice neat little bow before people even have an idea of what to make of it, and thus that leaves them with only their first impression. And the first impression, as always, is usually quite negative. And Erda does not deserve that in the slightest bit. Because yes, while indeed she's used to explain the plot ideas, to explain narrative conveyance and all that nonsense, that doesn't mean that she alone is a bad character because of that. I actually really love that idea of a character. And allow me to explain it to you. Alright, so before I go on, this is not anything official. This is my understanding and my interpretation of the character. This is what I think, this is how I see her. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. To me, Erda is a tired lady. She's someone who met Nioth, the Emperor, way back when, and she believed in him for thousands of years. And she followed him. Even when everyone else ran, she still stayed with him. Why? Because she believed in him. And it's never stated outright by the Emperor or Erda, but the way she talks about him, I think that they were lovers. And I think that she may have actually loved him, to believe in him. So that's why she stayed with him so long. Despite what everyone said, despite how everything happened, her love for him drove her to question everything but still stay with him until he asked her to create the next generation of humanity, for her and him to come together and to make sons, the future of all of us. And she does it, and she's happy and she's excited and she's ready because she's finally created something that she can be proud of, her crowning achievement, her sons, with the man she loves of all things. But then she realizes that while she is the mother, he is not the father. He does not see them as sons. He sees them as tools. And he will use these tools to conquer the galaxy in a bitter, bloody, and terrible war. Think about this from her perspective. Someone who you loved, someone who you trusted, has essentially betrayed you. Because remember, she wasn't just the mother of the primarchs. She was the clinician, she was the midwife, she was everything. Her being the mother of the primarchs, the genetic donor, was only part of what she did. She had served and worked with the Emperor for tens of thousands of years. She was a vital part of the Primarch project even before it began. She is the reason why Primarch genetic coding, whilst Legion genetic coding, can work. She was a geneticist. She made the Primarchs possible. She stabilized them. She is what prevented the Thunder Warriors from happening to them. She was the missing key. She created demigods in every single sense of the word. Her life's crowning achievement, her life's work, were making these sons. And she truly saw them as sons. That's why when she realized the man whom she loved betrayed her and was going to take her sons and make them into warriors and monsters and tyrants of the foulest and most evil nature, that is what broke her. Her love was shattered. So in a final act of desperation and defiance, out of grief, pain, and hurt, instead of condemning her sons, her children, to a lifetime of bloody tyranny, she threw them into the hands of fate, hoping, beyond hope, that at least one of them could live a happy and normal life. And then she left. She had nothing else. She went to live alone, because there was nothing for her. Even the wrath and retribution of her former lover never came. And while some people may say, oh, the Emperor is just a cold, callous dick for this, he didn't care anymore, why would he care? I feel like you're missing the impact of the relationship. Erda does a lot to measure the Emperor. She gives so much context to the Emperor. And if you read the Emperor in context with Erda, you realize that he probably did care about her as well. But he was running out of time. He didn't have time to run off and find his former lover to find out why she did this, why did she betray him, to try and reconcile or fight or anything. All he had time for was to prepare humanity for the next step of the evolution, to prepare us for what comes next. All that was left to him was his great work. And time again, the Emperor would give everything and everyone for his great work, even the woman who loved him. Because when looking at the Emperor and Amara, Erda, John, all, it's easy to ask, what are perpetuals? And in my opinion, perpetuals are humans. Humans who want the best for the future. They have the best of intentions for the future, for the grand scheme of things. But in the end, in the short term, they're still humans. They make mistakes, They fail, they lie, they're hypocritical, they do good and evil in equal measure, because they're still human. The Emperor was a good man in the long term. He wanted to save humanity from itself, to prevent what happened to the Eldar happening to us. But in the short term, he was an evil tyrant. Just think about it like this. If you lived a good and peaceful life, then one day some golden dick comes from on high and tells you, join my Imperium and be my servant or die, what would you do? So too does Erda match him as a tragic mirror. Throughout her entire life, she wanted to help guide humanity, to slowly and gently nurture it, as a mother would, I suppose. But then at the very end, when she realized everything that's happened, instead of trying to fix it in a concrete manner, in a secure manner, in a manner that would guarantee success, she is left broken, finally overcome by grief and pain. So, in a fit of human emotion, she casts her children to the wind, hoping and praying that something good will come of it. And then she gives up, and she lives in exile, waiting for the death that will never come, praying beyond hope that her children live the life that she wanted, the life that she never had. Erda is often called the mother of the primarchs, and that is what she was. But that is not all she was. She was indeed a plot device, impacted and inputted in a way that was so asinine it made no sense. But that is not all she is. Yes, she is one of the most powerful perpetuals to ever exist, but that is not all she is. The reason why people hate Erda is partly the same reason why they hate the Emperor. They both only look at them for either one aspect. Either they only see the evil, or they only see the good. But that's not what human beings are. If you judge everyone based on only either their good or their evil, you will always have good people, or you will always have evil people. Rather judge them holistically, and see them for what they are. Terribly, terribly, terribly flawed characters, who in the grand scheme of things wanted goodness, but due to their own human flaws, due to their own fatigue, due to their own humanity, they made mistakes in the short term that caused so much death and destruction it could not be reversed in all of human time. That is what they were. That is what it is to be human. And in essence, that's what it is to be perpetual. But what is a perpetual, if not a simply more powerful human being? So just as human beings make mistakes, so too do perpetuals make mistakes. But just as they are greater than normal humans, so too are their mistakes so much more greater than normal human mistakes. So the next time you take a look at Erda, see her not as that stupidity of GW, or simply the mother of primarchs, or a plot convenience. Rather, see her as a perpetual, a tragically human figure, trying to play a god, and in the end, making mistakes like any other human. Some of you may hate Erda, some of you may love her, some of you may say she's a good character, some of you may say she's a bad character, but one thing you cannot deny is that she is undoubtedly a great character, much like the Emperor of mankind himself. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think down below. What do you think of Miss Erda? Again, I like her character. Now, I think she did a lot of stupid things, but again, she's kind of like the mirror of the Emperor in that case. A lot of good intentions, but in the end, the plan needed some work. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Let me know what you guys think about Miss Erda. But I would say massive thank you guys for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Massive, huge, giant shout out to brand new private tier members, Mr. Josh Lee 1320, Mr. Adrax1, Mr. Ethan Elam U71. Thank you so much for joining my brothers. I love you and appreciate you, and welcome to the core. Hop on over to the Discord so you can get access to the special perks. Shout out to Officer Core with my Captain tier member, Mr. Sergeant Cossack 68W173D. Shout out to my awesome Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3, Miss Withdrawer of the Void, Mr. Curtis Studies, and Miss Tori. Shout out to my awesome Sergeant Jam members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean IRL7, Mr. Matthew Merrill, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my Crippled Gym members, Mr. Tremayo the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, The Gentle Salamander, The Wench of Warhammer, Major Doshinet, Mr. Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. And finally, but certainly not least, shout out to my privateer members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SVW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Hayeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortis Unum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Adrian Von Furen, Mr. Morley Bankrupt, and Mr. Matthew Peter. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you all. Someday our membership's getting a bunch more of benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access videos, brand new nonsense, and my love and support. But remember, this will always be free. So whether you give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Also, I want to say a massive, huge, ginormous shout out to you guys on the last video. I asked you guys for support and y'all fucking delivered. Y'all delivered, man. I love you guys so much. This community is amazing, and I'm so thankful for you guys, man. I love you guys. I fucking love you guys so much. You know, come here. Come, you bring your pretty face over here. Mwah! You guys are great. Seriously though. I love you and appreciate you guys, and thank God every day I got y'all. But ladies and gentlemen, that is enough of me being mushy. For I have been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. Yeah, I'm sure to stay loyal, the boys and gals. Very, very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Season's greetings, Happy New Year, and thank you guys for being with me for a whole goddamn another year. I love you, and here's to a full-on next year goodness. So ladies and gentlemen, until next year, I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss Rangers! It's still mad to me that people are willing to jack off to Erebus but not Erda. Fucking mental that, eh?